Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 3, Episode 3 of Pennyworth. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with Martha and Thomas. Obviously, picking up in the aftermath of some, the conversations they had last episode, continuing it, Thomas, brings up the fact is he can't trust Martha. It's like, right, we're married. We're supposed to not lie to each other. And you have lied to me. You've lied to Samantha as well. But I think the conversation she had with Mary, I think, kind of plays into that. She's like, right, you want to have something of your own. And I think that's what it is. You want to have something a little exciting because like having that day-to-day job in life just isn't like in Martha's blood, because it's like, right, she's kind of been a part of like something wild and crazy since the beginning of the series. And I think she couldn't quite let that go. She wanted something that was just kind of outside of the family. She wants something kind of her own, we're all entitled to our own secrets. And I think there's the element of, there's also the fact is what they do does help people in the long run. But for Thomas, it's like that kind of needed to be put aside because we are married. We're supposed to be in this together. And even that conversation speaking of that conversation with Mary, it's like, oh, how did you and Mr. P make it work? You were married for 28 years. She was like, we were husband and wife, and that was like the main focus. Everything else was just, things passing by. Like that came first and foremost. That was the crux of it. No matter what other issues might come our way, it's just kind of that. Yeah, just kind of like the daily grind, just the thing of it all. Like being husband and wife, that's what matters most, first and foremost. So, but Thomas and her did talk to each other honestly about what they know. It's like, well, she talked about what she know, and he talked about what he knew and what he learned from his father, and also that, yeah, he didn't want my help. He wanted your help. Is that, yeah, and I told him no. And she's like, wait, you did? It's like, yeah. Like, because obviously he's got no love when it comes to his dad, and even if it's related to, like, his family situation, he's not going to put Martha in a situation where she would have to be mixed up in whatever shenanigans his father's connected in. So, but Martha does sit down with Dr. Glubb, and Glubb is like, yeah, the reason, like the CIA agent he killed, that was kind of his caretaker. It's like, that guy, he's like, unfortunately I had to do that. I was like, at first I was like, oh, are you going to say like because he was saying like the CIA is trying to kill him now because he's trying to sell his services, what he's come up with, because he's the only one that really knows how everything, well, who knows how much, like, because he's probably got all his research on him, so the Wayne Enterprises nor the CIA has access to that research, so they need him dead so they can make sure that no one else has it. But I mean, they might have it, but they might have all the research, they might have it on them, but they still don't want him out there giving it access to anyone else with this whole thing. Once again, it's just that old warfare situation of like wanting to come out on top. So, but he says like the CIA is after him because they're trying to kill him. And so I was like, oh, was the person that was with you trying to kill you? He was like, no. So he makes it sound like, yeah, maybe the guy would have eventually been given orders to kill him, but that was also because he initially ran away. Because it has been like in the first episode, like after he killed that CIA agent, that was like a week later by the time they found the CIA. So he had been like on the lam for a while, so that's why they're trying to kill him now, because now they know he's trying to sell stuff. So that wasn't the initial thing. It's just like, right, I need to get away from my handler, so I killed him, and now the CIA wants me dead because they know I'm trying to sell what I know to the highest bidders, and they can't allow for that. But now we understand why Jessica was the pawn in everything that she was, because it turns out, oh, hey, they went after her family specifically because he was trying to buy it, I guess, either for his own, but I'm assuming it was because he has a governmental job, so he was trying to buy it for the British government by Glubby off. So you're like, okay. So now, because I was like, once again, why was her parents specifically the victims of this? It's like, right, they had some role in it, and we now have the context for it. But also, sadly, later on, Thomas ends up getting drugged and mind controlled by Victoria, which we now have context to. I was like, oh, so how did that go down? The fact that she called Thomas is like, right, makes it a little easier to kind of plan your assassinations better. Because I was like, you can't really control that, can you? I was like, how do you set that? It was like, right, all you have to do is call the phone, call someone, have someone pick it up. You had to make sure that it was her picking up, and then you just play the song over the phone, and she's entranced just like Thomas was. And we also got a little peek as to what that looks like from that person's perspective. Like, it basically warps reality, and it kind of feeds into, like, I think, your anger. So, like, a lot of the resentment and issues that Thomas was having towards Martha, it was almost like the drugs were basically manifesting that to make him see, like, the bad. Like, it basically personifies your underlying issues, or, so in her particular case, she already had issues with her parents, and that those issues were basically manifest, like, exponentially, like, intensified, and that's why I'm assuming why Jessica ended up killing her parents. So, and the same thing kind of goes down at the end. Luckily, Miss P came back in time to knock Thomas out. So she's calling an ambulance for Martha, but the police for Thomas, and it sucks. Because Patrick was like, no, you can't do this, but Victoria needs to clean house. She sees that, like, right, Glubby's already met with her, so it's like, right, too many people in this. I guess it's also to force... She wanted to cover this up by making, like, right, Martha's murder, just because it's like, right, she's already been in contact with Glubby, can't let that happen. So, and she's also doing this super off books, because she is saying, like, right, I don't need permission to do what I'm doing. Like, I kind of have, like, full authority, they're going to probably, like, if whatever she does or she gets caught or whatever, the U.S. government is going to completely denounce all of this, even though, like, they were probably well aware of it. They probably weren't aware of everything she was doing, but still. It does seem like she is kind of going off book, because even Glubby was like, right, Patrick isn't the one you should be worried about, it's Victoria. He doesn't say Victoria, but he was implying her, and, like, immediately after he ran, Martha was outside, Victoria was there watching her. So I guess the easiest thing is just to make it seem like a domestic thing, because they were already having issues. Thomas snapped. I don't know if that's to put Patrick more in line, like, oh, your son's in prison, and we also cleaned house, so it all worked out. Like, would they have had Thomas kill himself at the end? Would it have been like a murder-suicide thing, or would it just end it with him locked up in prison? Speaking of Jessica, we did have the whole Dave Boy situation, because he did regret things playing out the way they did. Because he even says, like, right, it's been a long time since he ever had to kill a woman. And it's like, right, especially because it's like, the world's just looking at her as a sociopath. It's like, oh, she killed her parents, and then she immediately went on a killing spree at Sandra's place, so now she's getting painted as a villain, and Dave Boy doesn't like that. Because I guess there's almost this element of, yeah, she was a sweet girl, that it was beyond her control. She was used and manipulated and made out to be this psychopath. But part of me almost wondered, does Dave Boy feel a little camaraderie in that? Because, he was in the army, and it's like, right, all that him, Baza, and Alfie did, like, it stays with you. Like, out of any of them, like, they were all messed up in their own right. Dave Boy is the most, like, super messed up. That's why he stays drunk all the time. Like, constantly keeps liquor in his body at the very least. So, I think maybe that's why he felt a little sympathetic towards her in that regard. But also, like, once again, he said it. Like, he hasn't killed a woman in a while, and I think it didn't sit well with him. I also love, lightening it a little bit when Lucius called to talk to Alfie. It's like, tell him I'm not here. It's like, no, I told him that. And he says that you're sitting at the bar with Dave Boy beside you. He's like, I fucking told you he had cameras in here somewhere. Didn't I tell you? And it's like, do you have cameras in here? He's like, yes, of course I do. But that's beside the point. But yeah, Dave Boy, I love that him and Alfie were talking, and, Alfie's trying to, that's the thing, Alfie kind of deflects a lot, kind of like, well, the whole thing is what it is, so it's like, oh, you want to keep investigating this Thistle thing, like, he's like, oh, you got any clues, Sherlock? He's like, well, we got this and this. He's like, oh, look at you. He's like, shut up. This is about getting justice for Jessica. It's like, justice? He's like, wow, and you call me the softy, Dave Boy, So he ended up going to the Thistle's funeral. He mainly went for Jessica, not for their sake. And he ended up walking away with a quote-unquote friend. We'll see where things kind of go on that front of him and Sally. But him going off at the funeral like that, it's like, right, because he does still have guilt over what he did. It's like, yeah, you kind of had no choice. If you didn't do it, she already killed everyone else in that room. So there's and she would have killed Sandra if it wasn't for you. So you did the thing. You did the right thing. But even he's like, right, it wasn't in her control. He's like, I did what I had to do. Like, I ended up putting her down. And everyone's like, oh my God, because he's saying this in front of everyone. He's like, hey, don't worry about it. Fact is, it was a clean shot. She was dead before she even hit the ground. I guarantee you she didn't even feel anything. And then he's up there saying, like, yeah, there's worse ways to go. He's like, you could get eaten alive. He's like, yeah, we had this whole thing. I'm like, I love that he's up there telling a whole damn story. First and foremost, the government covered this shit up. So Aziz did you a favor and kind of got you in not being in the crosshairs of all of this. So I guess that also answers the question I had before about like, oh, so I guess it's not going to be a thing of, well, Jessica's dead and now, because I know at one point in time, Aziz puts out a warrant for Alfie's arrest, at least in the trailer. So either that's going to happen later on because maybe it has something to do with the Dr. Glub situation, or it could be more so like, oh, that him saying that last episode was just taken out of context or something like that. I even love the whole thing of like, yeah, they call me Dave Boy. Well, why did they call it? Why? He's like, why what? She's like, why do your friends call you Dave Boy? He's like, I've actually never asked. I'm like, I love that. So it's like, yeah, why is that? Because I was like, I would assume, because like his last name's like, what didn't he say it was like McDougal? So I'm like, I was like, I guess. I'm like, yeah, how would you get Dave Boy out of that? I'd be so interested if he actually does have Alfie's like, how'd you guys start calling me Dave Boy? Like, you really don't know? I'd be so curious what the I would assume there's like some military story that he just doesn't remember. That's why I'm sure I'm sure there's some alcohol involved. Just because it's Dave Boy, I feel like it has to be like something alcohol related. Maybe not. I don't know. Because will you hear the stories about how some people got their nicknames? You're like, oh, that's a wild nickname. Because it's like, oh, like it just seems because something like Dave Boy seems like so innocuous of a nickname that I'm like, there probably is like you probably hear the story and you're like, wait, that's why you call Dave Boy? It might be that type of reaction we'll have. We'll have to wait and see. But another big chunk of this episode is about Gully. It seems like I guess that's where all the kind of quote unquote wayward experiments go. Is that also once again nice song choice. Is that what? I'm only going by the line of the song, but I'm like, is that what it's called? Is it like I Believe in Miracles? It's probably not. But it's just like, I mean, it makes sense. It's like the 70s, so of course you're going to pick something like nice and funky. Because even they kind of leaned into the funkiness of like, because especially this, because I guess because of what was it? It's like psychokinesis, psychokinetic drugs or whatever is what they were saying. I think because of the psychedelic elements of the drugs and just what the mind control being like the main crux of the season, I think that plays into like the thematic plus the funkiness of it, like the 70s and stuff kind of lends itself to the I mean it might be even like it's like either because it has been 5 years, it's like because it was like mid 70s and it might have been like what 72 73 or something like that at the beginning of the series, so we might be like late 70s, like maybe like 78 79 if not already pushing 80. Either way, that's beside the point, but I just thought that was kind of interesting. Like, oh, there was someone, was it Cecile, working on the gadget that like helps with the mind control thing. So it's like, yeah, we're working on that. Not less like, because like we saw the guy from the beginning of the first episode of this season, like with the giant arm thing. We see him there. So I don't know. Once again, that's the place for the wayward, powered people or what. I mean, Goalie's down there, so I don't know if her situation was that like, oh, she's like, yeah, I look like a welder with this on. I thought that was just something kind of like they were experimenting on those like mind control, like those goggles or whatever. I think so. So I think it's a culmination of just experimentation on new gadgets and stuff. Plus some of the enhanced people are there, and Goalie's there, miserable as hell. He's like, oh, I was in love once. I'm also like, and because I referenced Melanie last episode. Because I would reference Thomas's sister, and I was like, that was the last time we saw her was when she went to America with Melanie. And I'm like, the fact is he's kind of like, oh yeah, I'm like, he's like talking about lost love and stuff. I'm like, yes, she slept with Alfie, but you also were an abusive piece of shit. So there's that. But, you know, he's also a hero. And he's like, because, you know, it's like, oh, millions of people love you. And Goalie's like, not really. Even to the point, Lucius is like, right, if you go out there, people will be scared of you. It's like, yeah, what all that talk about love? People weren't immediately jumping for joy the moment Goalie popped up. It was just, yeah, people were freaked out. I also didn't realize that was him in the trailer, the flinging the cop car. Totally didn't realize that was him. I guess because I was expecting him to still be fully blue, so either they mitigated that because those were still early days, and now they kind of got that under better control. Maybe they're able to regulate it a little bit more, the whole Captain Blight thing. So because of that, he's not like Dr. Manhattan Blue anymore, so there's still traces of it, but it's not to the extent it was. So Alfie gets brought in to deal with this whole situation, and it's like, wow, you're going to basically shake us down helping take down a friend as a choice means to make more money. He's like, well, if only I was married to a billionaire, then I wouldn't have to worry about it. She's like, oh, okay, touche. So it's like, right, he gets in there, and I love that he's talking to Goalie. Goalie's like, hey, offer my friend a drink, because it's even Alfie's like, yeah, you know, did he mention the fact is I fucked his wife? And I love that it's Lucius being like, yeah, he talked about it in a very philosophical means. Mostly. So it's like, Alfie's like, cool. So there's my buddy in there who's been drinking, who's already a little unhinged to begin with, even more unhinged since his circumstances as Captain Blight, and the guy who has every reason to want me dead. Sure. Let me go in there. And he's having the most casual chat with Goalie. And it's like, yeah, what does he's like, he recognizes a lot of stuff. He's like, right, Melanie never loved me, and I couldn't force her to love me, but what does she see in you that she couldn't see in me? And it's like, well, I also, I didn't beat her, so there's that, you know? And he's like, well, that's true enough. And it's like, you know, trying to get him, you know, it's like they had this very complicated thing. He's like, oh, this guy, he fucked my wife and everything, but he's like, honestly, he's my own, like, in all honesty, he's the only friend I have. And it's like, that is the saddest part, like, they had this tumultuous relationship despite everything that's happened between them, but it's also like, you kind of are the only friend I've got, Alfie. You know, he's so alone in this world. He wants to go to America to find Melanie, but it's like, that's not going to work out for you because Aziz and the British government sure as hell aren't going to let you go because you're too much of a valuable asset. You are a national weapon, so... And I love that he's like, yeah, you're my he's like, are you my friend, Alfie? Alfie's like, who said I'm your friend? He's like, you are my friend, Alfie. He's like, yeah, I am, of course. And about to go for a hug, he's like, back the fuck up. He's like, all right, you know, fair play. And I love that it's like, yeah, everything was good, everything was kosher until that guy ran his mouth off because the bet he had didn't go well and he blamed it on Goalie. Luckily, Alfie was able to kind of shut him down. It's like, cool, I got to shut you down. Oh, yeah, because also if I'm not careful enough, I don't get you hooked up in time, you will die. It's like, so cool. It's like a 5-minute limit. And the guy who was like, okay, that bet of mine didn't go well, so leave that guy behind, and that suit of his that he's wearing will probably be a pretty penny. I'm like, really? It's like, this guy was just holding you hostage. You have every right to be pissed, but now you're trying to shake if I get it, but it also is like you're trying to shake down the guy who robbed you. I'm like, that's pretty scummy of you, Penny. Well, Alfie's kind of like, yeah, let me just get him out of here. You wanted him out of here, now you want him to stay. Like, make up your damn mind. Like, I'm just gonna get him out of here. We're good. And then like everyone in the bar starts trying to jump Alfie, and so he's like, all right, puts out a smoke grenade. And has to get to work. It's like, right, you're beating up some of the hostages. The non-shitty people just immediately left given the opportunity, but everyone else, it turns into like a roughhousing situation, like the kind of hooligans, I would say, probably like started some shit. Now if he had to put them down, so. And I love that Lucius came in with the wrench like he's going to help, but it's like, no. But luckily, they were able to help Goalie, but it's like, yeah, he's just going to have to go back to that sad life. And for Alfie, it is kind of hard seeing him like that. It's like, he legitimately does feel bad for him, considering everything. But at least for Lucius, it's like, regardless of how hopeless the situation is, the fact is that he still has that hope in him. Like, oh, he's got hope alive. Like, oh, he's going to go to America and find Melanie. The reason why that's good is because no matter how hopeless it is, having that hope, it keeps him living. And it's like, considering his circumstances, like, he could easily off himself, but it's like, no, he's too much of an arrogant prick to ever kill himself. You know, that's what made him such a good leader, like, leader in the army. And it's like, oh, and for Lucius, I love that conversation of, he's like, arrogance being a good quality in a military leader. He's like, I didn't think that. He's like, Alfie's like, it's the only fucking characteristic, really, because he's like, right, you have to believe yourself to be something special, and that basically death won't come for you. It's like, right, that was Gully fucking Troy, and it's like, well, look at him now. But it's like, yeah, and when you're part of that group, it kind of instills itself in you a little bit too. But Lucius said, because it was a whole thing about Alfred saying, no, people don't change. And Lucius saying that might actually be the issue. That Goalie now realizes he didn't change, and now it's too late that he didn't change, because now he can't change. He could have been given, if things had played out differently, if he had changed before, like, he wouldn't be stuck as he is now, and that just, he's going to be stuck this way forever. It's too late to change. He's already lost everything. Maybe if he had changed back then, with Melanie would still be around, and he wouldn't be in a sad state that he's in right now. So it's just like, just everything's kind of going wrong, and it is just extremely sad, you know? And that, I think, kind of sparked something in Alfie to go check on Sandra, which there's a whole bunch of people partying at her place. It's like, yeah, like, this place was literally just a slaughter room, probably only a couple days ago, might not even be a couple, might have been one or two, maybe even a couple hours. And I'm sure Sandra invited all those people just to kind of drown out any noise in her own head. And just, she didn't want to be alone, I'm sure. But also the fact is, all these people are around her. It's like, oh, you fucking vultures. You know, like, get out or I throw you out the window. Like, that's your choices. Yeah, they've had their ups and downs, but obviously Alfie still very much cares for Sandra, so he was checking in on her. I hope it isn't just kind of a hidden Quinnet thing. I wonder, is that just going to be a, no, let's give this a serious try again, or at the very least trying to be there for her, when he's kind of failed to in the past. Because he's been there in some regards, but he hasn't always stuck around. Because him and Goalie did have the conversation about kids, and it's like, Goalie even said, like, oh, he thought about it, but Alfred was like, yeah, that's just kind of not you. You're just kind of not built for it. And I think he kind of saying the same thing about himself, so. We'll have to wait and see where things kind of go on the whole Alfred and Sandra front. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of it. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.